hear me?
I can hear you.
Fantastic. So it had something to do with push to talk?
I think so. I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
Oh my gosh. I have to make you louder. Can you say something?
Something.
Okay. Now you are louder. You're very loud now, I hope.
Fantastic. Another loud American. Nothing new.
Yes. So, hello. Welcome to this small stream from the,
Happy to happy to be here.
yes, from the biggest Polish trans streamer.
Wow. Yeah, the biggest Polish trans streamer. How is there a lot of Polish trans streamers? Are there many?
I think I might be the only one.
Really?
Yes.
That would be an achievement actually. Are you really the only trans Polish
I
streamer?
I think so. I think that's why I'm the biggest one.
Wow, that's revolutionary. Look at that.
That's because the Polish LGBT rights like are non-existent basically.
I actually, when I was in Ukraine, it was easier for me to interview people and ask them about homosexuality in Ukraine, in an actual like war zone, than it was to get any interviews in Poland about homosexuality.
That's because the government is at war with the LGBT in Poland.
I was actually speaking to Homofaber, the NGO that deals with like refugee rights and stuff like that. And I tried to even breach the conversation, and they were like, "We do nothing around this issue," and it was like basically just softly nudging me forward, like move on from this topic. It was
Yeah,
very strange.
you would need to go to an NGO that deals with the LGBT issues, to have
I,
a, you know. Oh,
yeah, I even tried to reach out to some Polish LGBT activists, but they were all very jumpy, which I guess is understandable.
yeah, because there was this whole Polish Stonewall thing. I can send you a nice video. It's called the Polish Stonewall.
That sounds interesting. I would be interested in reading about that.
Yeah, because there was a non-binary, because the Polish discourse around trans people began from non-binary people, sort of interestingly enough. So a non-binary people was arrested because the non-binary person uses she/her pronouns, right?
Hmm.
And she devastated a homophobic truck with homophobic slogans, right?
Hmm.
And she got arrested. And then there was a whole protest around it, and 45 people got arrested, and they were driven to random jails. And the non binary person didn't have a lawyer for 2 weeks. It was a whole mess.
Wow, that is a whole mess. So you said that they were like messing up homophobic trucks, like these
Oh,
like
just one truck, just one truck.
just one truck. Got you.
Yeah,
Oh.
and it became a whole big. Like, some people were even foreigners that were arrested randomly off the street because they just happened to be at the side of the protest on the day of the protest.
That's when you know everything's going right and the country's functioning perfectly when they just
Yeah,
start arresting anyone they can grab.
and it's like you have those LGBT free zones. I'm not sure if you've heard about those.
I've heard rumor. I don't know anything about it specifically,
Oh,
but I've heard
it's
rumors.
it's real. It's real. Because Poland, I'm not sure if you've had this impression when you were in the country, but Poland is ruled by the far right party, you know?
Yeah, I was led to the impression it was led by the right. I didn't know how right wing. I know they were extremely restrictive on issues like abortion, but I didn't
Super,
know how far right wing.
super far right. And the restriction of the abortion is like a whole other mess because the government has banned aborting damaged fetuses, you know?
Huh. Even if it's a health risk.
Yeah, the leader of the party famously said a child, and the leader of the party is his own like mysterious figure because he's like the de facto leader of the country, even though he does not hold any office that would lead one to believe that he's in charge of the country, but he's in charge of the party that rules the country, so he is de facto in charge.
Huh.
And
I saw a lot of I actually saw like I was in Lublin for a while, because it was close to the border, and I guess like there the political advertising of the country is very different than in the United States. It's a lot more subtle.
Yeah. And there's also this whole election silence during the voting time.
There's this what?
There's a thing called the election silence period on the day when you vote. You cannot do any more campaign stuff, or talk about candidates or try to persuade anyone. It's forbidden.
Why is that?
It's to not to sway people at the last time, not to try to pressure people to vote otherwise than they want to at the last time moment. It's at the day of the voting itself.
I guess I can understand that.
Yeah. So there's this whole election silence period during the day of the voting itself. I heard that's a thing in Germany as well, I think.
That's not a thing in the United States. I've been a part of a lot of campaigns. I've ran my mayor's campaign. I've been involved in other campaigns, congressional and otherwise. And the day of the election, we take staff and we put them near every really every polling station if we can, with signs and merch and everything to try to get those last few votes if
Oh,
possible.
in Poland, that's illegal.
No, that is a campaign standard over here.
Oh, and of course, there's this whole thing about being, ID, right? Voter ID.
Is that big over there, voter ID?
Oh, in Poland, just everybody that is 18 gets an ID, gets issued an ID from the government.
See, that's what I want. I was like, I think the easiest solution to the voter ID issue in the United States is like, okay, we'll do voter ID, but everybody when they turn 18 gets a voter ID.
Yeah, that's a thing here. You just go to an office, you sign a few papers, and you get assigned an ID. It's mandatory, basically.
I am very much in favor of that. I think the only difference I would make it is that I would have them send it to you.
Yeah, right. From via mail or something if you cannot, because in the US it's more difficult to have a office nearby when you live here, right? Sometimes.
I think I just want as few barriers as possible, and I could easily see somebody being like, I don't want to go get I don't want to go out of my way to have to go get this ID or something. I just want to make it as easy as possible. The higher voter participation, the better I think a society usually is.
Yeah, I think so. Recently, Poland has had like a big turnout for the president of Poland, like the race. It was framed a bit like the Trump versus Biden race, but unfortunately our Biden lost. Because the whole government took a pause in governing and instead took part in campaigning for its right-wing candidate.
I actually don't know how strong the left is in Poland. Do they have any power, any influence, seats, anything?
Not very strong,
When you say they're like not very strong, when I say the left, are we saying like the liberal left, the socialist left?
More like the Democratic Party-ish left.
Democratic Party. Okay, gotcha.
But less even. Because
so like the Lib Dems maybe.
Yeah, in Poland certain topics are just taboo,
Yeah, I got that impression.
The progressive president that was supposed to, like, all the cards were stacked against him because the government used the national television to promote the far-right candidate, which is a thing, which of course led to a very interesting, funny joke that happened later, because later the Belarus thing happened, right? You're familiar?
Yeah, you're talking about the immigration. I mean the migrant issue where there was a bunch of refugees on.
Oh no, I mean the Lukashenko winning the fraudulent.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
So Poland cried that Germany, because Germany said there's something fishy about this election because it was a bit fishy, you know? The government campaigned for a particular candidate, used state media to campaign for a particular candidate, you know? It's not really. And of course, there was this famous debate between the two candidates. The public TV invited the counter candidate, the Polish Biden, and the Polish Biden said, "I'm not going here. The Polish, like the public media is horrible." And then the private TV said, "Instead, come to us and debate at our place, you know?" And do you know what the result was?
What was the result?
Two candidates had two separate debates at the same time for different TVs, in, and next to them was an empty seat where the other candidate was supposed to be.
We had that happen a few times. I think that happened with John Ossoff when he was running for Senate. The other candidate just kind of refused to debate him for the second or third debate. And so what they did is they just had him stand on the debate stage next to an empty podium.
Yeah,
And they would ask him a question, he would answer, then he would give his opponent time to answer the question, then he would just bring the camera over to the empty
but
podium and just look at it for like 30 seconds.
this situation went further because they both had their empty debates at the same time.
So you say there was like nobody? There was nobody on stage?
There was one candidate with the public TV that he was being interviewed by the public TV basically, and the second debate, quote unquote, and the second candidate was being interviewed by the private anti-government TV.
This sounds like a very effective and fantastic system.
Yeah, and so the most progressive candidate we had, basically when asked about things like gay marriage or gay adoption, he said, "Oh no, I'm not even, no." He basically said, "No, no, that's not even on the table for talking about."
Jesus Christ. Don't even bring that up to me. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
like basically, yeah. So like
That
this
was
is
crazy because I mean Zelensky's like literally at war, and I don't know if you heard about the civil partnerships thing that Zelensky talked about,
yeah,
but in Ukraine there exists a legal framework where if you get enough signatures and you have a Ukrainian ID and you can prove you're a Ukrainian citizen, the
right,
government has to respond to a petition. And so a bunch of activists during the war was able to get enough petition signatures to make the government respond to a request to
right,
legalize gay marriage. And the reasoning they used was that a lot of gay soldiers are dying, and their husbands and wives cannot take them and bury them, and their families are out of the country, and they believe that they deserve the dignity of having their significant other being able to deal with their funeral arrangements and cremation, burying them, the whole end of life stuff.
right,
And I expected him to just kind of like flat out reject it, or have some just like lower minister just be like, "Oh, we're not talking about this right now." But his response was like, constitutionally, it's not a good idea to do this right now because we would have to change the constitution in order to do this, because in the Ukrainian constitution, marriage is defined as between a man and a woman.
right.
It's
It's like in
but he's
Poland, I guess.
Yeah, but he seemed to be a lot more open for civil partnerships, which, I mean, for me, obviously that's not exactly what I want,
Right.
but to have the president of Ukraine openly talking about civic partnerships does show a significant move forward, I would say.
But from what I've heard, like the Polish far right tried saying, "Oh, Zelensky is like against the LGBT just like us," and he said, "No, I'm pro LGBT." I'm like, yeah,
I've never seen him say anything like I am like pro LGBT in the
like
way that like, hey guys, it's okay to be gay in the gay way, whatever.
I might need to look it up, but I've heard that he did say something along the lines of they're citizens like anybody else, and it's okay.
So there was this one interaction on the campaign trail where somebody confronted him, and they were basically saying like, "Oh, you degenerate, yada yada yada. You are fine with the homosexuals." And his response was, "What's like, leave them alone. They're citizens like you and me.
Yeah,
They don't
I
need to
think
be,
we're referring to the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that that's good. I would say that's still a far cry from like an open like we need to advance LGBTQ plus rights in the country. It's more just I will not let the country backslide statement, you know?
Yeah, well, keep in
Which
mind, to contrast it, the Polish president literally ran on the slogan of the LGBT are not people, they are an ideology.
yeah, no, I got the impression that Poland was honestly more homophobic than Ukraine for
Oh
my
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Poland and
I'm
Ukraine.
not even surprised about that.
I remember I was coming back from Zaporozhye. We were uh, camping out near the Zaporozhye River, not the Zaporozhye River. What's it called? The Dnieper River. Um, we were coming back from the Zaporozhye front line. We were drinking and kind of just having a cookout. And after we had all significantly got plastered, uh, we decided to go home, drive home, and on the drive home to our apartment that we had been using in the city, there was this Ukrainian judo coach, really burly guy, very just manly guy. He was doing judo throws on us during the cookout. He was teaching us judo throws. And during the cookout, at some point in English, I was talking to one of my Polish colleagues who also spoke English, and we're having like a political debate while very wasted. And I let it slip that I am bisexual.
Right.
And during the drive home, the person, and I didn't think he spoke really much English at all, but he must have somehow gotten it into his head that I was a queer. And he looks over to me and he points to a house that we're passing, and he just says, "Famous gay man live there, good
I
man,"
I
and just keeps
see.
driving. And to me, I read that as like his way of just being like thumbs up or like you're okay or something, right? Which was sweet. I mean, obviously, it's not the perfect way, but I appreciate the effort, and it's more than I expected.
Right. Well, the Poland is basically at the very last place when it comes to LGBT rights, you know? Like to the point where European Union when it comes to those LGBT free zones tried intervening, right?
Hmm.
They said we're not going to give European funds to the cities that have declared themselves the LGBT free zones or LGBT ideology free zones as they are officially called. And the government said, don't worry, this is discrimination. We will give you twice as much as the EU have promised, you know?
Yeah, it feels like Poland for a very long period of time kind of sparred with the EU where it
Oh, it
wanted
still
to.
is. It still is.
Yeah, it still is. It's part of the EU, not over the economics of it. A lot of it was more of over the human rights issues, pro democracy issues.
Yeah, oversliding away from democracy, like towards being like Hungary.
Yeah, and I when I was in Poland, I spoke to the former Undersecretary of State, and
Mhm.
I brought up to him this similarity with Poland, this history with I mean the similarity with Hungary, the history with Hungary, and I said Hungary has really turned its back on Ukraine, really backstabbed Ukraine in the eyes of a lot of people. And a lot of people say that Poland has enabled their behavior against the European Union,
Yeah,
which has allowed them to kind of be where they are right now. Do you think Poland holds any responsibility for this? And the entirety of the interview, the guy spoke perfect English. I mean,
right.
like perfect English. And out of nowhere, it seemed like he had lost his hold of the English language. And he was
Oh,
like, "I have no statistics about that." I was
well,
like, "What do you mean statistics about that?" It wasn't a question about statistics.
the answer is that they both sort of depend on each other. It's a like how you say codependent relationship between those two countries to sort of um, you know depend on each other to be able to uh, fight the evil European Union.
Hmm.
It's like
I
a
mean, I've
codependent.
just I really got the feeling from the few Polish politicians I did speak to that a lot of them were having regrets about their relationship with Hungary over the last few years. That they
What party were they from?
oh my gosh, I actually
That
Um,
also depends, right?
I
If they were
I for,
from peace, then
I
yeah,
know that
guys.
they used to participate in the solidarity movement.
Okay,
Um,
but that's
I know that's not a political party, but that's
that
what I
doesn't tell
remember.
me much because both the right and the left united in the solidarity against the former quote unquote communist government.
Yeah, I don't actually remember his political party. Actually, I think I had his card in my wallet, and I could probably see it
That's
there.
okay. I think that's okay. And also the topic of Orban actually became the topic of Ukraine became like this a bit of a crack between Poland and Hungary, you know?
Orban, you mean, became the crack? You would say it's a
Ukraine
war?
became
Oh,
the
Ukraine
crack
became the crack.
because
Yeah.
no matter right how far right the government will be in Poland, it won't be, at least not openly, it won't be pro-Russia, like you know, like Orban was or even still is.
When I was in Poland, the anti-Ukraine sentiment that I found, the only one that I found in the entire country, was with the like white nationalist right.
Yeah, that's right.
And they seem to not like Ukraine for a few reasons. Number one, Zelensky is Jewish.
Hmm.
Um, Number two, like the historical fighting between Ukrainians and Poles and the villages and the slaughters that went on with the
Right.
UPA and the kind of history there. I remember actually,
It's very
I
complicated.
it's extremely complicated, and I remember actually I even met Polish aid delivery drivers who didn't like the Ukrainian Trident because they had seen it on so much used symbolically with the UPA so much, and they just
Right.
really don't like the UPA. Um, I had actually went to a Polish school for very young children
Oh,
around Lublin. Actually, I think it was about an hour outside of Lublin, and I went to this school because they were hosting a lot of Ukrainian children,
oh,
a lot of Ukrainian children who had fled the war.
right.
And the whole time they were really rolling out the red carpet. They were very nice. They offered me food. They gave me food. They just really wanted to, it felt like they really were like, the impression I got from the translator was like they had never met an American before. They were like, whoa, an American, almost. It was a very strange experience.
Right.
But the one thing that they really, really pushed to me, like really heavily, was this idea of like the Polish and Ukrainian children, they play together. They play together. Everybody's happy here. Everybody's smiling here. Everybody's getting
Yeah.
along here. And I like the first time I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But then like the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth time, I was like, okay, they're really like hammering on this. And what I eventually figured out, probably like 10, 20 minutes after I'd left, is like, oh, they were trying to basically explain that they weren't racist.
Oh,
that they weren't racist towards Ukrainians. That the past is the past, and the Ukrainian children are treated very nicely. I was like, wow, I didn't expect them to even.
right. Like
I wasn't even gonna ask them about that.
there's an important aspect to all of this that I'm not sure that you've gotten the impression of, and that is that the actual citizens in Poland did the main brunt of the helping when it came to the refugees, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because like, uh, even like I accepted like two refugees into my home, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the government basically did allow Ukrainian people to get this number to access healthcare and many offices. But the main thing was done by the citizens who gave basically their homes for Ukrainian people to stay at, you know, for free. Like they would register with the office would check if the apartment or a house is good enough for a refugee to live, and then, you know, a refugee would go and live in that place.
I've seen a lot of interesting places that refugees had been able to like live in and stay at, and I remember the weirdest was probably an MMA gym. There was an MMA fighter who, well, after the war initially started, it was really interesting. And the impression that I got from talking to local government officials and refugees and just people who were involved in the response is that the reason why Poland got so much credit for the response, I think a lot of the credit was due, and I think it was good that Poland opened its borders, but the
Yeah.
credit is misplaced in Polish society, where I feel like a lot of it is placed with the current administration, when
Yeah.
most of it should be
The
posted with
citizen
local administrators, and
and the
the
citizens.
citizenry.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the main thing that the federal government did was open the borders,
Yeah.
which they failed to do other times when there was
Yeah. Yeah. Still, they still do fail.
Yep.
In the other case, we all know about the infamous Belarusian border crisis where people were just left to die in the border, you know?
I talked to the leadership of Homo Faber about this, which is an NGO in Poland that deals with these issues specifically. And I asked them why the Polish government accepted Ukrainian refugees and not
I think it's
these
racism.
refugees. And before I even finished the question, she just said racism.
Yeah, I
I
think
said,
it's racism.
and then I tried to ask a follow up question. And she was just like, "It's racism." I was like, "Okay, never mind."
Oh,
It
well,
was
what's the follow-up question?
it was like, why are you so confident? Like, it was like, why are you so confident? And she was like, it's racism. Like, she was just like very quickly, like, the reason why the Ukrainians got accepted, is because it's race, because they are not brown. It's like,
Well,
okay,
I would
gotcha.
say that it's because of the nature of the government in charge. You know, they are very far right, extremely far right. Like,
Yeah,
so that will go in hand, that sort of racism, which is ironic because historically, mm, like Poland has a native Muslim population, you know,
I did not know that.
dating back to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
Hmm.
And even the Polish government was like, wow, those Tatars, shouldn't we kick them out? So they're like Muslim and stuff, even though they've lived here for hundreds of years, you know? This
There,
is,
Islamophobia seems to be a massive issue
oh
in
yeah,
Poland. I mean, like, a
yeah, yeah.
massive issue.
I actually want to do a material on this, you know?
I
Because,
I would even speak to people who are like somewhat like more liberal type Poles, and when the issue of migrants came up, and it was very obvious like what my position on protecting migrants was,
yeah,
like they worked really hard to just emphasize exactly how much they take out of the public coffers, and how a lot of them are coming for handouts, and like all
yeah,
like just, and I was really surprised because the person seemed to be generally pretty liberal.
well,
Didn't seem to be a pretty liberal person, but I mean that's true of a lot of societies where the liberals, like, not the thing is with liberalism is it's a very big tent. It's an extremely big tent
right
that
now,
covers most of traditional like liberal democratic parties.
also Poland is skewing a bit right now because of the circumstances, you know?
Do you when's the last time Poland's had a left-wing government?
Oh my gosh, many years ago. Well, the fact is that after the fall of the quote unquote communist government, the country overall started skewing more right wing. And there's a really good book that I started reading about how because it was a workers' movement, you know,
Hmm.
and how it was squandered, and how the right wing populism has gained an upper hand in sort of taking advantage of that, you know, energy that existed after 1989. Yeah,
Strip clubs, though.
right. Do you know the significance of Lublin as a city?
The significance. I mean, I saw like a lot of castles, but I don't know the historical significance or anything like
The
that.
historical significance was like the place of the signing of the famous Lublin Union you know?
The Lublin Union. No, I don't know that.
Yeah, it combined the Kingdom of Poland and the Great Duchy of Lithuania into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm familiar with that. Okay, I'm not familiar with the specific document signing, but I am familiar with the Polish
Like
Lithuanian
this
Commonwealth.
because I decided, even though I don't have that much historical content right now, but I've decided to do history because of that infamous Putin speech before the invasion, you know?
Yeah, I'm from. I do think that
It's
I remember a
so
lot of people said that that speech was really convincing, but it really isn't.
it had
It really isn't that convincing. I feel like he just, if you know absolutely nothing about Polish, Ukrainian, or like any history of
it
this
had
specific
so
region, it might be
many
convincing.
historical lies that I couldn't believe it, you know?
The only people I heard that say that speech was convincing are Americans, and that's because
Oh,
most of them didn't know
like
the history.
I mean, starting from the fact that what is now Ukraine was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, you know?
Hmm.
Continuing with the fact that the Ukrainian national identity started forming around 19th to the start of the 20th century, you know?
I have to actually. There are a significant amount of people. Well, okay, I don't want to overblow it, but there are people who legitimately think that Poland, at some point in this war, is going to turn on Ukraine and is going to start taking territory
That
well, of
is
Hungary.
that is part of the Russian propaganda from day one.
I don't know exactly what like. How do they expect that to go? I don't under. I mean, the exact opposite of that prediction is
I
happening.
will. That's because um, it goes back to the whole Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. You know,
Hmm.
people often like to say that it was basically Poland, and that Poland stopped existing when it's not true. You know, it was not Poland. It was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It was like a composite state. It was a there was no such thing as a national identity back then, you know? It,
Modern nationalism is very, very
yeah, very,
modern.
very
The idea
modern.
that the people of like a certain ethnicity or something like that
Yeah, that
make
was
up
not a thing.
the body politique is very like it's like 18th 19th century, like
Yeah,
very
that's
recent.
right. So in the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, the class in charge was the nobility, you know? And it was like a state based country. And the country comprised of today's Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine, right?
Hmm.
And so after World War One, we skip you know, when the countries started regaining their sort of independence, the newly formed nations started fighting over the terrains that were this bigger whole, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, you know.
Hmm.
So we found ourselves in this situation where, for example, Lviv was a major Polish city, but all the people living on the outskirts were Ukrainian, right?
Hmm.
So it led to war, and so uh, because of that war, Lviv and Kiev became part of the Poland after World War One, right?
Hmm.
And this is basically the key to the propaganda that says, "Oh, Poland still wants to regain Lviv, Kiev, so they will probably hop in and invade any day now."
I've been look I've been to Lviv a few times. They are some of the craziest people in the entire fucking country. People in Lviv, in my experience,
Oh,
and they are probably some of the most nationalistic Ukrainians you can find in the entire country.
well, it's like a
Um,
complicated history.
the idea of anybody trying to like occupy Lviv. It's one of the few cities where I'm pretty confident you'd have like Afghan style resistance. Like I'm
Oh,
pretty sure it'd be all over the country, but it'd be particularly intense in Lviv.
Russia
So
had
that's
its
why, like,
way because keep in
I, I
mind,
I always knew they would never get to Lviv. I just said it was like there's impossible they could ever occupy this land anyway. It's like
because
it's
after World War One, it was a majorly Polish. Okay, like most people living there were Polish, but after World War Two, the USSR came in and did have a little bit of a reshuffling of populations.
They seem to
which
do
is
that a
what,
lot.
yeah, they do seem to do that a lot. So basically, I think there's this sense of,
Wait. I remember once somebody I remember I said like, it is ethnic cleansing what they did to the Tatars and they did to this and like they
yeah,
moved these people around. And they said, no. That's not ethnic cleansing. That's ethnic realignment. What? It's ethnic just ethnic
my God.
reorganizing. Yeah, okay. So because they're moving them from place to place, it's like that's ethnic cleansing. That's no, because they didn't kill them all. It's like, that's not a necessity.
You've
But they
mentioned
did kill a lot of them.
you've mentioned the white nationalists that are most anti-Ukrainian, which is very ironic, you know?
A lot of Nazi graffiti in Poland.
Yeah,
Well,
that
not like
is.
Nazi graffiti, but like white nationalist graffiti.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a lot less swastikas and a lot more of that like international white pride sign. The one with the circle and the two lines.
yeah. But the big irony in this is like a lot of them say glory to Great Poland, you know? And what they refer to as Great Poland was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which brings us to the irony of the fact that Ukraine was part of it. So,
Well, I would assume that they would say like, well, that's rightful Polish clay, and they would
well,
bring up the EPA, and they would say that this should be returned to Poland or something
that's of
along those
course
lines.
nonsense, you know? There was a big rumor that there was a meeting between Poland and Ukraine, and there was this huge rumor that Poland and Ukraine would combine, and that
To make the
the
mega state.
new, yeah, and that the new capital would be in Lviv. The country would change name to something something, and the reasoning was because if Ukraine and Poland combined, Ukraine would become part of the EU overnight without any paperwork needed.
America, of course, will stop that because if Poland and Ukraine were to combine, they would become the world hegemon. They would conquer the world with borscht, good food, and corruption.
Oh, we still need Lithuania and Belarus. Belarus being the puppet state of Russia makes it difficult.
I gotta say, Belarusians are some of the nicest people that I've ever met.
And they are also very brave
Extremely brave,
because they
unbelievably brave.
they did this whole. Well, you could. I think it's not an exaggeration to call it a nationwide strike. You know,
Yeah, they did engage in. They did. They went on.
like
They
all of
engaged
the
in large scale.
factories stopped basically at some point, but they were crushed, sadly. But now a lot of Belarusians sort of do sabotage when it comes to the war effort.
I've seen some train derailment
Yeah,
and blowing up of train lines. Besides that, I don't know what else they've engaged in, but any type of activity like that is unironically, unbelievably heroic.
yeah,
Because the thing is about being arrested is just because you get arrested doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get tortured. But if you do something like that, you're going to get tortured. You're going to get tortured by the Belarusian security forces.
especially
And
in
I don't know if you've heard about Belarusian torture. It is particularly bad.
I feel like those plastic bats, right?
From what I've read, from the reports I've read, it's a lot of making people stand against the wall while they beat them. Sometimes it involves like rape. It's pretty bad.
Yeah,
They will beat people close to death, or they will literally beat people to death.
yeah,
And they'll do it in groups of people, right? So people know what's going
yeah.
on as well.
There's, oh gosh, there's so much that can be talked when it comes to Ukraine, especially like all those strange people that you have talked to about it, you know?
I've talked to a million strange people about Ukraine.
Like when they say arguments like, oh, but Ukraine wanted to join this NATO, so Russia had no choice. And they sort of like this strange treating Ukraine like a pawn on a board. If Ukraine steps out of line, Russia is suddenly justified in invading, which
There's
is
a lot of denial of Ukraine's national sovereignty and ability to control its own foreign policy.
yeah, and
Um,
Like the worst offender is when people say, but there's Nazi, but there's Nazism in Ukraine, you know? This is to me the worst offender because even if you had like 1,000 of the infamous battalion, what was this name? The battalion,
Azov.
Azov. Yeah, if you have like 1,000 Azovs, like it's still at the end of the day an internal affair of Ukraine, not Russians' affair. Like what? Like even if it was ultra, even if it's like you know, even if the problem was existent, which like is that Ukraine is not a Nazi country. Come on. Like even if there was a problem, it would be still an internal problem of the country.
I find it when it comes to Ukrainian Nazism, politically the Ukrainian people are not Nazis. They're not close to Nazis. They're not even. I think.
It's historically a very complicated topic because the people always go to World War II, how
Mm,
Ukraine was on the side of the Nazis, right? During World War II.
mm-hmm.
But you need to look at the context, right? Basically, people at that time saw this uneasy alliance as perhaps the only way to be free, you know?
I remember. I already know that like the Nazis are politically like dead in Ukraine.
Yeah.
The Azov has a political party. It isn't succeeding. It isn't doing well. It hasn't done well ever. And when you talk about like the real like Ukrainian far right, and I'm not talking about the Ukrainian right wing. The right wing exists in every country, but the Ukrainian far right white nationalist stuff.
Right.
The closest I would say the party that's closest that has seats right now to that, it's probably Svoboda, and they have one seat out of 450 in the Rada,
Right.
and that's a big decline from what they had around Euromaidan time. And
Yeah.
even then, they weren't like so prominent. Like, oh, they're like the Republicans, or oh, they're like the Democrats. Um,
Right.
they were more like I don't know, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. When it comes to like they had a few people here and there. But politically now the fascists are dead.
Yeah.
There are fascists in the military. I've met them, but I've only met one. I met this one Nazi. By the way, let me be clear: the fascists in the military are a small percentage. I kind of just when I talk to people, I say that if America was invaded tomorrow by China, let's say they took California, Washington, like they started taking state after state, all of American society would be deployed. The left, the right, everything would be deployed in national defense, and I think everybody
Right.
understands that.
Yeah.
Nobody would be like, "Oh, excuse me, but did you know that this person's like a proud?" Nobody would care.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Zero people would care. Or any concern that people would have would probably be reserved until after the fighting. Um, that's how I describe it here. All of Ukrainian society is fighting, including the ugly parts. The ugliest part to me, honestly, is right sector. People talk about Azov. Right sector scares me more. They haven't moderated at all, in my opinion. Um, and that's actually the one real Nazi that I know for sure is a Nazi that I've met. Because there's a few people that I'll see like a rune on them that is sometimes popular with white nationalists. There's some runes that are more racist than other runes. You know, like the Slavic runes. Like some that are like directly just like runes that were heavily used by the Nazis. Some are kind of like on the line. But the one person I know for sure that was a Nazi was a right sector guy, and I know he was right sector because he had the giant ass tattoo on his neck. Um, and he had like an SS symbol on his bag. His
Oh my
uniform
gosh.
was like Germanish in nature. Like everybody else was wearing kind of clear like military fatigues, or he was wearing like a old German military
Which is
cap.
also ironic, but I will tell you why in a moment.
And the guy didn't really say anything to me. I didn't notice all of the white nationalist garb until afterwards, and I was looking at the footage because I wasn't looking at his medical bag because there was like 20, 30 soldiers, so I wasn't looking at all the tiny symbols or anything like that. But what I noticed is that this guy, he gave me a Snickers bar midway through when we were hiding from a drone. He offered me a Snickers bar, and I ate it. So I ate a Nazi Snickers bar in Ukraine, and
Oh,
that's And that's my one interaction with Nazis in Ukraine. I haven't met anybody else that I could
Right.
say for sure I think that person's a Nazi.
Although
And
that's a bit ironic because, as I've told you, Ukrainian people wanted like join the Nazis during World War II because they were a chance at freedom from the USSR, right?
there was the yeah, I don't know if you've
And
ever seen the have you ever seen the propaganda poster of Hitler in Ukrainian that just says the Great Liberator?
oh no, I haven't.
There was this propaganda poster made by the Germans that
But
just like well, the Germans very much leaned into this idea that they were a liberating force,
yeah,
quote
but
unquote, but their actions didn't line up with it at all.
yeah, because this is actually a thing that you learn in high school. You know, the our historian was a pretty good historian. He basically said that the Ukrainian people were Germany's big wasted chance, you know, because
Mhm.
they could have had like a really eager ally to help against the USSR, which like we can't know it with it if it would have tipped the scales, right? But it would have helped them a lot against the USSR, and but because like the Nazis saw Ukrainian people as subhuman, they killed them indiscriminately, whether they helped or not. You know, so the one,
That's one of the positives about fascism. Not that they did that, but one of the positives about fascism is its inability to make long-term allies and its
yeah,
inability to. It's like a very unstable. Like its hatred of everyone makes it
yeah,
very hard for them to have
to
long-term
have
allies.
like, yeah. So I find it ironic to like a Ukrainian soldier to have like an swastika and stuff, considering how the actual Nazis treated Ukrainian people, even though they were willing to ally themselves with them to fight the USSR. You know?
Yeah, I I do you know of do you know about this UPA bar in Lviv, the secret UPA bar?
No, no.
So there's the UPA, of course, is still very much. It has a lot of respect in Ukraine
All right.
for just kind of like the idea. Oh, they were the freedom fighters. The narrative in Ukraine about the UPA is they fought against the Soviets and they fought against the Nazis.
Yeah,
That's how they're talked about. Um, a lot of the more unsavory edges of the UPA is usually sanded out, like how most nations do with their history.
yeah.
Whether
I
you
can
look at
give you an
America.
example in a moment of the Polish equivalent.
Yeah, like in America, like if you have like a president with a picture of Andrew Jackson, right? You ask him, "Why do you like Andrew Jackson?" He's not gonna say, "Well, I really like all the things he did to the Native American." Like nobody's gonna say that. They're gonna say, "Oh, I like that that old
Yeah,
Hickory won the War of 1812." But I went to this UPA bar, and I was expecting something along those lines, and it was you had to knock on this door down this long alleyway, this long dark alleyway on the streets of Lviv, and the guy opens the door and he points a fucking gun at you. It's an MP40. He points an MP40 at you, and then he asks you for like the password, and then you got to give him the password, and then he'll like bring you in. He'll bring you downstairs, and the whole place turns into like an underground wooden bunker, like a guerrilla command center, where all the staff are dressed up like UPA soldiers, and they're serving traditional Ukrainian meals, and they're playing like UPA songs over the stereo, and they've got like matchboxes making fun of like Hitler and Stalin, calling them like wives or something. It was like really weird. It was a very strange experience. The food was good. The food was good, and then they had a gift shop afterwards, and they had like model German grenades from World War II. They had like a bunch of just wild like UPA merch. It was a very strange experience. Made stranger by the fact that it was like secret. Like you had to have like the secret knock and everything. It was very weird.
you know, countries have their own little not so great lores. Like in Poland, you have the cursed soldiers, right? Do you
Uh,
know who they are?
say them again?
Cursed soldiers.
No, I don't know that.
So like after World War II, there were soldiers that were part of the Polish army, but they fought against the new quote unquote communist government, right? So
Hmm.
they are declared heroes, but they also raided villages and killed people to get supplies. So they're not as amazing as they are being officially portrayed, you know? But
Yeah.
still, that part of them is being washed out to, especially by the current far right government. They even declared a holiday in their name, you know?
Hmm. I think like nation states really like care about like the
Mythology.
national mythos. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
mythology, the mythology of the nation state. Every nation has it,
of course.
and I I I understand being honest about your history and being critical of revisionism.
Yeah,
Revisionism that erases history or tries to sand out the edges. I think it's okay for a nation to have national icons, but we need to be honest when talking about those national
yeah,
icons. And some national icons, I will say, quite frankly, are better than others.
of course.
The thing that gets me though is when somebody tries to take the Ukrainian national mythos around the UPA, around Bandera, on any of these issues, and say because of this national mythos, we should not defend Ukraine, or Ukraine should surrender,
Yeah,
or Ukraine is a Nazi state. If that is the standard we use, then we need to talk about how many statues and monuments we have in the United States for slave owners,
oh yeah,
for horrific pieces of shit. I live near DC, and the Washington Monument is named after a man who owned people.
yeah,
He owned human beings. But when we made the Washington Monument, we didn't make it under the idea of like, God, we love that this guy owned human beings. It's like this is the founder of our nation who helped lead us towards these ideas of freedom of speech, this Constitution, all these cool things that we still treasure today as Americans.
yeah, of
Even if
course.
someone was to say that, oh, I still don't think that's right. I don't think it's okay to idealize that person or like give them any favor. The idea that you would say, well, America just got invaded by a foreign army, it's occupying them, it's slaughtering them, filling mass graves. But did you see they have a monument to George Washington?
Yeah.
Did you see they have a monument? It would be silly. Everybody would laugh at them. Hell, we have monuments to Confederates. Confederates, people who
Oh my
directly
gosh.
fought for
Yeah.
the cause of the
Of
Confederacy.
slavery.
Yeah, this is a big social issue in the United States. I mean, it seems to be generally the consensus now seems to be generally in American society that these statues suck and we don't like these guys, which I think it took us long enough to get to that conclusion. But that's even worse than I would say by miles and bounds than George Washington because those people have zero redeeming qualities. There's no redeeming qualities to the Confederate generals or traitors.
Of course.
Um,
I've got like a amazing historical trivia for you concerning the American Revolutionary War.
oh, what's that?
There were a few people from because when the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was partitioned between Prussia, Russia, and Austria, people fled, and some of them fled to the U.S. to take part in the war. You know,
Huh.
and one of them was Tadeusz Kościuszko. You know, and he fought for the revolution, and then he left a will. This is very interesting and funny because his statue was toppled by the BLM protest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was signs and the toppled statue, and some people were like, "How dare you topple the statue of our great Tadeusz Kościuszko?" And then articles popped out saying, "Well, wait." He not only would not have cared about the statue, he would have marched through the BLM. Did you not know that he left a will? Like when he was leaving the US, he left a will in which he wrote to sell his estate and use his wealth to free the slaves and give them education. You
I
know?
did not know that, but that is very admirable. Hey, do you want to know about people talk about the they them army?
No. I mean,
You're not
yeah,
familiar with that
sort of.
term?
I mean, sort of, yeah, I am.
So there's this idea that Ukraine and the West are like the gay army, right? It's like they're gay, they're queer, and therefore they're weak, and that's why Russia will win, and they're crusading against
Oh my
homosexuality.
gosh.
And you can sometimes see
Oh
it in
my
like Russian
god.
propaganda. You can see
Yeah.
it where Chechen commanders are saying that these shaitans in the West, led by the
Shatani. Yeah, but very
yeah
similar to the Polish word.
these Satanist, gay, trans, Jew,
Yeah.
Nazis
It's the trans
are
people's fault that Russia had to invade, didn't you know, from Putin?
yeah. Obviously, HRT is what killed Depabushka's three sons in a trench.
Yeah,
If there was, if only there was, there was just, if only if everybody used only he, him, and she, her pronouns,
but
then the war
I would
wouldn't
like
happen.
to introduce you to the biggest salt to the wound of the U.S. conservatives that worship the founding fathers.
What's that?
There was another person from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth called Kazimierz Puławski. You know,
Hmm.
he was attributed to being one of the two creators of the U.S. cavalry,
Hmm.
and he was intersex.
Huh.
You know, the
That's
greatest,
pretty cool.
one of the biggest heroes in U.S. history because he was one of the only people that was just given like this honorary citizenship. You know,
Hmm.
became like a honorary U.S. person and like had like the quote unquote bone structure of a woman. You know?
Huh. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, like intersex people have kind of always existed,
Yeah.
so it's just a question of like how much have they
It's
been
like
reported on, how much have they been
it's sort of
talked about.
like the big fun thing that one of the people that the conservatives probably worship was the thing that they would be bigoted, the person they would be bigoted against, you know?
Yeah.
This sort of, and he helped creating the country, you know?
Are you familiar with Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben?
I think maybe
So he was a Prussian officer
Prussian. Okay.
who basically had to leave Prussia because he was just slanging dick and bussy across the country, um,
Oh, right.
because he was very gay, and he liked like 19-year-old, 20-year-old guys, and so he has to leave. He goes to America, and Washington finds out about like the fact that he's queer, basically. At least I think they did, and they just was like, we don't care, just general, just like train our guys, and he made the American
Right.
military a professional
Yeah.
military,
Yeah.
and it's part of the reason why we won the Revolutionary War. So if it wasn't for a gay man,
So it
America
was
probably
the
wouldn't exist.
LGBT that won the
Yes, the first they them army general.
true. But speaking of, like, do you know what the biggest thing that Russia has managed to achieve? The biggest, maybe they didn't want to achieve it, but they did. You know, during from this war,
What's that?
Poland and Ukraine are now closer than ever before.
That is true. They are. I mean, I think a lot of, if you were to ever tell a lot of Polish people before this war that how close Ukraine and Poland would get, I think a lot of people wouldn't believe it. The Ukrainians as well. I mean, there is still a lot of historical malice there,
Yeah,
but
and it was
this,
like the historical malice has basically been fixed by this war.
it's only like if you don't like Ukraine now, you're probably just like a hateful white nationalist. Like you have to
Yeah,
literally be a Nazi to hate
like
Ukraine at this point
the
in Poland,
stop
which is
the
fun. Isn't that funny that for all this denazification, if you were to go across Europe, the people who hate Ukraine the most are the Nazis.
yeah, and like the stop Ukrainification of Poland is basically like a meme slogan, you know? It's treated this as a meme. And there was this,
I'm gonna Ukrainianize my state,
yeah,
100%.
there was this famous thing that Zelensky has said that between Poland and Ukraine there are no borders, you know?
Hmm.
There were people that were saying that we are seeing the rebirth of the Commonwealth in our time, you know? Things like that. And Zelensky also declared that because of Ukrainian people get get rights that are close to citizens in Poland, similar laws will be created in Ukraine that will allow Polish people to have rights that are similar to basically almost being a citizen.
It's pretty insane how quickly that relationship is built up, considering all this historical malice. I mean, I think as damaging as horrible this war has been, it has caused a lot of historical healing in Europe and other ways that a lot of people I don't
Yeah,
think considered
and
how
I
much
think like
it would unite people.
from the perspective of a person from Poland, that is not crazy. Like it's wild to hear the debates about Ukraine that you have. It's really something else, you know,
It really is something else. That is true.
to
I
hear. Yeah,
I think that in the United States, the majority of Americans still support Ukraine, and the majority of Americans still want to send aid. That's like
yeah,
undoubtedly true. All the polling data reflects that. Um, it is a minority of Americans, I think probably around 20 to 30%, who believe that we've maybe sent too much or we should send less.
I should send more.
Or send yeah, that's the 20 to 30% of American society. Over 50% believes we should send more and continue to send aid,
Yeah,
right? So a majority still support it, and worst case scenario in the near future, maybe a plurality supports it. It has increased the amount of people who are listening to these people trying to use Ukraine to scapegoat all of America's problems. I've seen a lot of this. For example, I remember Elijah Schaefer on Twitter kind of pinning the Ohio train derailment and explosion, saying, well, if we didn't send all this money to Ukraine, maybe we should be spending it on this.
yeah. Also,
Which I don't think people realize how small of America's budget we actually spend on foreign aid. Most
yeah,
Americans seem to be under the impression that we spend around 20 to 25% of our budget on foreign aid. Dude, we spend about under 1% to around 1%.
yeah. Like I imagine, but you have experienced actually. Speaking of the government, you have experienced some of the bad things that the Polish government has done in the whole thing yourself firsthand when you were in Poland.
Um, what experience are you talking about?
Like I'm speaking about the like those things seem trivial, but the government was begged not to do it, you know? When the Ukrainian
Oh,
refugees.
yes, I know what you're talking about. I actually asked people about this too. You're talking about the sirens because
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
plane
yeah, yeah,
disaster when all those Polish politicians, blew up after that plane crash over Russia. And
yeah,
there's these theories about, Russia doing it, which
yeah,
have only intensified since
yeah,
the
yeah,
war.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I haven't seen any substantial evidence.
There is no evidence. This
It
does not
seems it
exist.
seems I mean maybe it happened, but there's no evidence that I see that it happened.
It
And let me
was.
let me be clear. I am the last person who's going to give Russia the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
Um I
same,
but
but
it seems to be like a really nationalistic sticking point in Ukraine. And I remember when it started going off, I mean, for the first like 5-10 seconds, I was pretty freaked the fuck out
yeah,
because I didn't really. It was my first time experiencing sirens. I would experience them a lot more when I went into the country, when I went into Ukraine. But it was also over the border. So in my mind, war going across the border,
yeah.
Russia, bad relationship with Poland. I'm hearing air raid sirens. But like after 10, 15 seconds, I was like, oh, never mind. I because I just quickly Googled and was like, oh, okay, whatever. But I talked to people about it, like whether it was a smart idea, and every single time I asked about this specific issue, the first look on the face of the person I was talking to, whether it was the local mayor or whoever, was, oh
Embarrassment.
shit, how does this American even know what this is, right?
Yeah,
Like, why is this American asking about this? This is a really controversial question in Polish politics for this foreigner to be asking. And the second one was like, ah, shit, I can't believe we're gonna have to talk to him about this. And they slow down their answers. They slow to a crawl.
because
It seems
it's
that most of them were not happy about it. It seemed like most of them were kind of embarrassed that this
because it's
happened, considering the
yeah, it's
situation.
embarrassing. Like Karasu in the chat said, it was the creation myth of the far right government of Poland.
And I don't know how significant it is because I'm not living in Poland, but at the time it felt extremely significant to a lot of people.
Oh,
But
that's. I
I
mean,
don't think that
it's a pretty sad topic, you know.
it
It
is a sad
was.
topic, but like,
I will
gonna
like.
be
Yeah.
honest, like it felt kind of maybe like a Polish 9/11, but
Yeah, that's right.
it also had the vibe of 9/11 in current United States, which is like if I was to go up to somebody and say, "Guys, we need to go back to Afghanistan to really show those guys, what?" Like people look at me like, "What do you mean? What like what do you I don't know. We're not doing that." Like
Yeah,
it's
but
sad,
that's
but no.
because
But
the
the difference, I think the main difference here is Russia's currently invading Ukraine, so it feels a lot more
yeah.
present. And so all these old wounds are being kind of
But the fact is that that
surfaced.
whole crash was the I be frank, it was the stupidity of the also then right-wing government, you know, because to send your whole government in a single small plane to a place, you know, that's not a smart move.
It'd make a diversion off the original route. I think it was. Did they make like a
Because
Yeah.
you know, because there's a risk of the thing that happened happening and everybody just dying. And it was like a lot more than just the government. There was like people from universities, delegations, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember my parents lost a lot of friends they knew personally on that flight. You know, that's like
Wow.
it was a big thing. Like there were universities in which like there's a dean and like my mom's telling me, oh, the wife of this dean died on that crash, you know. So it was like and it's extra sad because the government made it a joke. The government turned it into a joke. Everybody's sick of it. Like the government in its wild crusade to try to create the mythos, the like unburied the bodies of the victims to try to, you know, poke and prod the bodies, etc. It was a whole mess, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's like it is literally like the 9/11 of Poland. Yeah, but also the sirens. It was more than just for that, you know. We also had the commemoration of the Jewish ghetto uprising. Do you know what the Jewish ghetto uprising was?
I vaguely.
So during World War II, there were two big uprisings. The Warsaw Uprising. Do you know that uprising?
Yes, I'm familiar with the Warsaw Uprising.
And there was also the Jewish Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Basically, Jewish people decided that since they are being taken away to die, they will choose their place of death and they will defy the Nazis in like a futile struggle, you know, to fight
Mm-hmm.
them. And there is commemorated, like it's a whole story to talk about the Jewish uprising. But the government has decided that, of course, it needs sirens, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the Jewish community, like the official, like the like the uh, ruling that like the ruling body of the Jewish community officially asked, "Don't do this. It will just traumatize the refugees." And the government was like, "No, no, we need to do it anyway." You know?
I can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How much longer do you think Poland is dedicated to supporting Ukraine? Because I'm under the impression personally that they're with this until Ukraine wins,
Yeah,
right?
I think
That
so.
if you're close, this is how I think of it. The closer you are to Russia, the more likely you are to support this till the end, right?
Okay, to start answering this question, you weren't here at the start of the invasion, you know? So you didn't see how Polish people reacted to the invasion of Ukraine. And everybody just panicked, you know? People started emptying their bank accounts. People started preparing to, I don't know, flee, you
Hmm.
know? People were freaked out. People thought that Poland would be attacked soon, you know?
That's the thing is like if they attack Poland, like there's going to be a military response from all of NATO. And now reflecting upon that, like months later, the idea of Russia attacking NATO almost seems ridiculous.
Yeah, but people, like, there's a lot of, like, we need to take into account that there's a lot of history, you know? And before World War II, Poland had like a pact with England and France that if should Germany attack, England and France will attack, you know, respond in kind and immediately attack Germany for attacking their ally, you know, and that ended how it ended, right? So Polish people kind of freaked out anyway, you know?
Do you think that so there's Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. Like these are the countries that are like with Ukraine to the end. What is the country in Europe that you think that is the most likely to break with the fold?
Mm,
I mean, outside of the obvious one, like Hungary, right? The other one I'm thinking about is like Italy, but
right.
Italy's never been that on board to begin with.
It's a difficult thing because now there's this pressure, like like Germany maybe. Although maybe that's because Germany was a bit hesitant to send those tanks from what I remember.
That's true. I think the thing is, I've lambasted the Germans quite a lot, and I enjoy it. That's why I do it because I my
Of
background's
course, to
German,
me,
so
it's
I'm
a
allowed
bit
to bully them.
troublesome to lambast Germany too much.
I'm allowed to lambast the Krauts all I want to, right?
Yeah, because
Because
this in Poland is part of the far right campaign.
as
Like,
Americans, all Europeans are the same, and
oh,
they should be equally bullied.
so like Polish far right government is basically saying um, Russia wants to conquer us through military, and Germany wants to conquer us through other means. Is
Oh,
the
economics.
yeah, which of course brings me to the propaganda topic, which I've heard. Have you heard about the new Putin speech
The new one. He made
from
another
a
one.
few days ago?
I no, I haven't. Do you have a link to it? I actually find it difficult finding Putin's speeches in the West.
Oh my gosh, it's like but the video is in Polish. I have a video prepared, but it's in Polish, so we have to translate it. It's like the gist of the speech is like that Putin said because, and that is like that should make people from, especially MLs from the West, think,
Mm-hmm.
because they say that, oh, Russia is just fighting the Nazis in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And just a few days ago, Putin has clearly said, no, we're fighting the Nazis of all of the West. All of the West are Nazis, fascists, and we are fighting them. We are once again, just like in World War II, fighting against all of Europe. We are alone in the fight against fascism, once again.
God, do you have if you have a link to that speech, I'd love to watch it on stream. There's like not there's just no links for it in the West because nobody gives a fuck about what he has to say anymore. The thing is, people talk about how good his first speech
Taka
was. His first speech was
mobilizująca
boring. I'm sorry, but Putin is not a great public speaker.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
he's,
just it
narracja.
gets lost in translation
the
as
problem
an
is
American.
the problem is
Um,
that I don't know if oh, there's Russian subtitles. Can you still hear me? I guess I have to press.
you don't know if what?
Um, or it's in Polish. That's the problem
Ah, okay.
because it's like there's a person talking about the Russian thing because Russia keeps trying to break Ukraine and Poland apart through propaganda. Like there was this when there were these fringes that did a protest stop the Ukrainization of Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And Russian media jumped on it like the hawks that they are and did a whole video, they did a whole TV segment about it. And I've actually made a video about it where I've translated that segment from the Russian TV. I'm not sure if you've seen it. They said it was some time ago when the Russian TV speaker was saying that Europe is finally waking up to the fact that the winter is cold, winter is coming, and that they cannot survive the winter without our gas, and they are rethinking their support of Ukraine and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like Polish people that are getting sick of those Ukrainians that are trying to Ukrainize Poland and stuff like that. And there's the whole...
I don't even like I don't even know how that would work because when you think about the Ukrainization of Poland, Ukraine's population has been going down for like the last 20 years. I mean, maybe you could make the argument that like through the migration and joining the EU, like more Ukrainians will move and then these people will move to these countries to get work and then that'll like Ukrainianize them, but I feel like if there's any country, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, that can't complain about like, oh, my migrant workers coming to our country and working, and that's like, oh, I'm so angry about that. It'd be Poland,
Yeah,
considering
of
how many
course.
Polish people go abroad to get work, send money home, which is very helpful for Polish families trying
Yeah,
to, stay above
England, for example,
water. Yeah, in England.
big
So I,
example.
yeah, it just feels like it just feels I don't know if I want to use the word hypocritical, but yeah, no, it feels hypocritical.
I think I would use the word.
Uh,
Like,
It's a good word to use.
personally, I'm not the biggest fan of nation states and national identities, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I am more of the. So I'm sort of think that if you have to have nationalities, I think it's like you should be able to move where you want and just declare wanting to be a part of the place that you want to be in, if that makes sense, you know? Like, if someone comes to Poland from like the other side of the world and says, "Yeah, I want to be Polish," then I'm gonna be like, "Yeah, okay, I guess you're Polish then," you know?
Yeah, I guess like I'm an American, so for me, like America is like the idea. It's the idea. It's a country based in an idea, right? Is the idea.
Yeah,
I don't really care about the skin color or ethnic background of the people who move to the United States,
yeah,
as long as they become American. They believe in American values. They believe in democracy. As long as they don't come to America and say, this democracy thing is pretty dumb. I don't know. It's free speech ideas. I don't like that.
of course, the more interesting question becomes what it means to be American, right? What it means to be a American national, because
It means oil, bombing countries, and
right,
barbecue.
because you can't really pin it in like language, as even if the right wingers would say tell you different. I think you cannot really pin it in a language or a specific culture because there are many people that even don't speak English probably, and you're still Americans just the same, right?
Hmm.
Like, or practice different cultures or do things different from the other parts of the US, right? And you're both parties are still Americans from the US, right?
Do you look at America's two-party system and think, God, that's stupid?
Well, Poland basically has similar things, so
Oh, there's only two big parties. Well, there's smaller parties, aren't there?
yeah, but only two are viable.
Gotcha. I mean, but others have seats, yeah.
And right now only one is viable de facto.
Hmm.
The one in
Well,
charge. We have
I'm sure there's other parties, though, right? There's other parties.
there's other parties, but there are only two really viable ones.
Ah, the Polish Socialist Party. It seems very popular.
Yeah, PSL. But yeah, the thing is that the Polish far right looks at the US far right closely and just mimics what it does, you know?
It seems we seem to have that effect. We seem to have that effect on people where
Yeah, but
we will. But
Poland,
that's not always true. Hungary seems to have been exporting a lot of its ideas
yeah,
to the United
to
States recently.
yeah, Karasu is like, I think you should get in touch with Karasu about this. She can tell you a lot about Hungary, about Hungary's response to the Ukrainian situation, etc. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
a very informative person when it comes to these topics. But Poland is a bit special because Poland was one of the only countries that do just openly support Trump during the last elections, you know?
Hmm.
When the Polish candidate was running for office, a few days before the voting, right? Before the event, he went to the US to talk with Daddy Trump. So, you know.
How, what was the when Trump became president? What was the reaction in Poland? Also, I think I probably need to head out somewhat soon.
Okay. Well, the reaction was that many people in the US, many Polish people in the US are right wing and they proudly voted Trump.
So they like Trump in Poland.
Sorry?
Do they? So they like Trump in Poland.
Yeah, a lot of like the government likes Trump. They called Biden weak, etc. The Polish government and the media, you know. It was a whole thing. They cheered for Trump in the election.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Did that stick like throughout his whole administration? Because I feel like if he was to run for president again, and people would hear his position on Ukraine, I feel like it would be very difficult for that position to hold up with
Yeah, it's
most
like
Polish
it
people.
could be like with Orban, but yeah, it could be difficult. Oh my gosh, I wanted to tell you something, but I sort of escaped from my mind for some reason. But yeah, I think there's this other slogan, it's not our war, but I think Poland and Ukraine are intertwined enough that it is fair to say that it is sort of our war, you know, as well. Like the Polish government openly says in the media, not just this is one thing that the Polish government and the anti-government group are in unison, you know, that defending Ukraine defending itself, that Poland treats it as Poland defending itself as well, you know? And you remember this incident that was, I think that is one important thing for us to touch upon before you have to leave. The crisis with the missiles hitting Polish territory, right? When everybody did the meme of Poland hitting the button, you know, the calling NATO to do the war, right?
Do the Article
etc.
5, yep.
Article. And like Poland has this strange reputation of being bloodthirsty. When the government's response was to let's remain calm, let's wait, let's not jump to any conclusions, let's not assume, let's wait for what will be, you know, what our investigation will say, and the opposition to the government and all of the private media that's always against the government was like, yes, let's listen to the government, let's not jump to conclusion, let's not be divided in this moment of tension, and let's all remain calm, and let's just wait for more information about what's going on, you know? Like this.
I do think right that the memes get a little exaggerated, and I played into those memes because the memes are funny, right?
Yeah.
The idea of Poland just like everybody else is like, okay, everybody, let's stay calm, and Poland's just there like shaking, just like I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. It's funny. It's funny the idea of like that
But
national idea of revenge, right?
that was a tense night, you know?
Extremely tense. I didn't think anything would come of it. I think most nuclear scares are just scares.
Yeah,
Most
but it
nation
was,
states like would really like most nation states would do everything they can to
yeah,
avoid using nuclear weapons,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And when you think about it from that point, when you think about like the world ending potential and how whether Russia likes it or not, they're on the world. So that if they have to kind of keep it alive, if they want to be alive,
yeah.
that usually, I think when I explain to people, that usually calms them down. I do think that the I mean the Ukrainian government's still adamant that they weren't the ones to fire the rocket over the border. I don't think I really believe them.
I think it
I
was like a failed missile, you know,
Yeah, it was a fail. Most
yeah.
likely, it was a failed anti-air missile.
It was basically, it has been framed as an accident from the very beginning, I think. It said that it's just an accident, you know?
Do you think that if that was a Russian missile and it was found out that it was a Russian missile,
It
how do you
is actually said that it's manufactured in Russia. That is the official thing.
Do you think if it was officially found out that it was the Russians who launched that, how do you think the response would have changed?
I think the government would have covered it up and did the same thing as now.
Really? I mean, that would have been pretty difficult since the whole world was paying attention.
I think I think the world would help cover it up, to be honest.
Man, I feel personally, I feel like it would have been basically impossible to cover up.
I
or be very
think there,
difficult to cover
I
up.
think it'll be a situation of we know what's going on, but we pretend otherwise.
I think my opinion is that would have probably seen an escalation of aid from Poland,
Yeah,
and I think basically the argument would have been that look, fighting them directly is a world-ending potential. We can do much more damage to them by just giving weapons to Ukraine, more weapons to Ukraine,
yeah.
than they could ever do through this one,
The,
most
the,
likely accidental
the
strike.
Polish government is actually pretty aggressive with the wanting to help. Like, send more, send more. Like, there's a lot of demand, especially in the media that frame, like, I'm not sure how this topic is talked about in the US media, but the Polish media does not mince words. It's like Ukrainian people are being attacked by a band of rapists and murderers, and we must send more aid because what we're doing is not enough, you know?
Mm-hmm.
This is basically the line. Like, I read like this article about a Polish military expert that said that Ukraine is being given the drip, but it's not being given the necessary blood transfusion. That instead of giving Ukraine um, gear when the gear starts depleting, Ukraine should be given enough to have a crushing advantage, you know? That should be the goal, to give the crushing advantage, not just to
The sooner they win
replace.
this, the
Yeah,
better it is. Yeah.
and that the longer it draws, then the bigger the, you know, that there are disadvantages. It's like all the Ukrainian equipment is expensive, right? And expensive to replace, then Russia can just keep throwing cheap stuff at Ukraine, you know? So there's this problem of Ukraine using very expensive equipment and Russia just throwing cheap stuff that it can cheaply replace again and again. That's one of the problems posed.
I really I feel and I think this is something we could wrap up on. I feel like that, and I've said this for months now, that the determining factor for Ukraine winning is not the Ukrainian will to fight. It is the West's will to back them.
Yeah,
How much they're willing to send, how much they're willing to increase their ammunition production, artillery production, how much they're willing to help Ukraine shift off of old Soviet systems. And I remember I heard recently Sebastian Gorka say we shouldn't be sending them any new system. We should only be sending them old Soviet systems. It's ridiculous to me
yeah,
because there's only so much of these stockpiles. Unless we get these countries that have these Soviet stockpiles to start producing these old Soviet artillery shells, we have to eventually shift them onto NATO systems.
yeah,
Not to mention, like, I do think there's an argument to be made about these systems being better, and if Ukraine's going to be part of our, I don't know, the quote-unquote collective West, EU, NATO in the future, then we would want them to be on NATO standard anyway.
yeah,
I mean, the question is, do we deal with this now or do we deal with this later? I think we have the most political will to deal with this now, so we deal with it now,
yeah. And of
and
course,
we send the new systems now.
the most important thing, I think it's crucial because people don't seem to accept this. I think personally that any outcome that does not end in Ukraine keeping its territory whole is not acceptable. I think it's not acceptable for Ukraine to have to, you know, give up any of its territory.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said this a few times, but you're asking Ukrainians to sign their neighbor's death warrant,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
is an impossible request of
That
them.
is unacceptable.
And the funniest thing about it, even though it's not funny, is that people often ask them to sign their neighbor's death warrant on behalf of them.
Yeah,
Is the idea that this is the best thing for the Ukrainians is for them to sign their neighbor's death warrant, which is
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah. That is like this unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you for
So,
having
yeah,
me. Happy to be
thank
here.
you.
Happy to finally make this happen.
Yeah, thank you for coming in Sława Ukraina. Yes, like it's in Polish,
Heron
it's
Bravo.
almost, yeah, it's almost identical in Polish.
Yeah, I
Oh
tried
yeah,
to learn.
I will tell you.
I
Okay,
know like a weird combination of Polish and
I
Ukrainian.
do one. I have one more trivia before you go, because
Yeah.
yeah, I've met an older gentleman at the bank because I don't really speak Russian or Ukrainian, right? And I've overheard a talk with a bank lady with an older gentleman, and he said, we all used to learn Russian in Poland, so I know Russian, right? And she said, she told the older gentleman, so it must make it easier for you to speak with the refugees. And he said, actually, the truth is that Polish is closer to Ukrainian than
I've
Russian
heard
is.
this too. I've heard this multiple times. I don't know if I've heard it's closer than Russian, but I've
He
heard
did
that it's
say that.
closer than a lot of other
And
languages.
did say that, and the lady was like, wow, really? But it still can be pretty difficult to understand them. And the older gentleman said, well, you know what? I've got relatives in the very eastern part of Poland, and I honestly find it difficult to understand them sometimes as well. So it's pretty relative.
I actually had Polish people translate for me, and they didn't know a ton of Ukrainian, but they're able to do well enough to get
Yeah, because
by.
some of the words are basically identical. And that's a thing that we could go if we get to talk again, because there's a very big identity crisis which causes historically why Russia is such a this particular grudge against Ukraine, you could say, and it goes back hundreds of years back. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, I need to head out.
Okay.
I need to head out. I appreciate this conversation. Thank you for being so patient when it comes to rescheduling
No,
everything. I
no,
really
it's
appreciate it.
okay. Like I think it happens.
Awesome.
I thank you for doing the work that you've done. I think I'm not sure if you hear it enough.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You have a good one, okay?
Yeah. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Bye-bye.
Let's see you. Bye bye.